Hello, it's that time again. This week something quite pedestrian. I mean, it's not provincial. It's not worth a fortune. There isn't just one of them in the world. It's all going to be quite disappointing for you. As we're not that far away from Wimbledon, I thought we'd do strawberries and cream. And we can't do the strawberries, but we can do the cream. We're going to look at this, which is, to all intents and purposes, a very standard Georgian mid-18th century cream jug. But the joy of this is the fact that there are lots of little features that when you look at it make it slightly better than average. And it's a good lesson at how to look at silver, to look at an object and look at all the details and tell whether it's a slightly better example than normal, which this is. But first we'll look at this form. This style of jug came in the 1730s, 1740s, became very popular in the 1750s and 60s. About half of these jugs that you'll see that were made in London will bear the mark of a man called David Moden, because he was a specialist in making these little jugs. Often his examples will be chased with decoration. Not always, but often chased with decoration. Unfortunately, a lot of the plain ones that he made will also then be later chased by the Victorians. And I'm sorry I don't have examples of chased ones of these. But if you were to look at a period one and a Victorian one, the difference usually is that the Victorian one is much busier. The Victorians, when they chased something up, something plain and Georgian, they did the whole thing. They sort of pushed it about and pulled it about, and it will slightly distort the shape of it as well. Whereas a period Georgian example that's chased, there will be lots of decoration, there will be lots of flowers and scrolls and maybe buildings and shepherds and all sorts of beautiful things and little details. But there will also be space in between them. And Georgian chasing is lighter and more spacious and more in proportion. And obviously it also conforms to the shape of the object because it's not happening after it was made and distorting it. It's all one part of the single manufacturing process. So look out for that. But as I say, we're looking at a plain one today. A good plain one is actually probably a bit rarer because it escaped being buggered about within the 19th century, because things like this were often maltreated. They weren't anybody's prized possession when they were made. I say that, maybe they were, but they're not big things. They're useful items that were used throughout the centuries, and they get a lot of wear and tear and a lot of stick. So the first thing you'll see when you look at a lot of these is 1, 2 or 3 of the feet will all have come off and been soldered back on. That's as Tom Jones was wont to say, that is not unusual. This one happily has never been repaired. It's got a little dent at the side, but I think we can forgive it that for being over 270 years old. And there are lots of people, just a note on condition, there are lots of people that would see that tiny, tiny little dent and they would go, oh my goodness, and they would send it to silversmiths. And they would do all sorts of things and knock it and hammer it and repolish it just to get that little dent out. Why bother? Why bother? These things are antiques. You know, if something was hanging off it, yes, of course. But it's all part of wear and tear. It doesn't disfigure it in any way. And you can often do more harm to a bit of silver in giving it to someone who's maybe not that experienced working with antique plate, in taking something like that out. Because at the moment, this has got a lovely colour. The surface is untouched. No one's heated it up. No one's hammered it. All the little nooks and crannies around the castings that people haven't been able to quite get to polish over the last 200 years. They're all nicely, slightly grey and black and untouched. And that's the point of an antique, for goodness sake. The point of an antique is it's old. You know, if you want a new one, go out and find a brilliant young British silversmith and ask them to make you a new one. And it'd be bright and it'd be shiny and it'd be perfect. But if you buy an antique one and it's lovely like this, for God's sake, leave it alone. You know, there's very, very few of these have survived without being ruined. So the very least we can do is respect them when we get them. I've gone off on one. I'm sorry. That was a rant over. This, it may not look much, but this whole body, I'm going to tilt it inside. You can see the interior is all gilded, which is a lovely feature as well. And that the gilding, it wasn't done for the looks of it. It was done to give a protective layer to the silver. Silver's quite robust stuff. But if you put certain things in contact with it, it can play up a little bit. Gold won't. So that's been mercuric gilded. Now, if I tilt it inside, I'm amazed you can see this, because I can see it in the camera. Can you see all the uneven little dots as I move it about? There we go. Those are all hammer marks, because this body started life as a little thick lump, little ingot of silver, like that. And the first thing the silversmith did was he took that and he heated it and he hammered it and he heated it and hammered it into a nearly perfect disc. Flat disc of the right thickness that he wanted to make this cream jug out of. It's thicker here. You can't put your fingers in, I know. It's thicker here and thinner here. It's drawn out here. But he thought all about this before he'd made that disc. He made it the right size. And then he began. And you'd offer this disc up to a curved surface and you would begin hammering. And you would hammer in rows. And that's what gives you all those little marks inside there. Row after row after row of meticulous hammer marks that are all done to move the silver into the shape that the silversmith wants it to be. And these are particularly, it always takes my breath away that they made these, because they've had to bring that flat disc up. They've had to hammer it out to form the curve here, and then they've had to bring it back in and then bring it out for the lip. And I think that's a hell of a lot of work to do that, to move that bit of silver. That's hours, it's days and days of work to make the body. And they brought up the lip and they've allowed enough silver here to bring that lip out and to make this lovely cut waved rim, you see, all the way around there. They've just shaped it. It's got a little bit of movement to it. One thing to look at on these jugs, where they cut in, where the silversmiths cut in here, that can be a weak point. And you'll often see, you must check for it. You must always look around the edges here and look for little dots of solder, because often they will split. And someone just goes to a silversmith and pops a little bit of silver solder there, and then it's fine for 50 or another 100 years. But this one is happily perfect along the rim. Once you'd made your body, you would have hammer marks on the outside as well, just like the inside. But to get rid of those hammer marks, because the Georgians, we like the look of handmade silver today, but the Georgians wanted it to look pristine. I mean, if you'd have gone back in time and made things on a machine and sold them in the Georgian era, they'd have sold like hotcakes, because they loved perfection. And I suppose this is what it's all about. It's all about striving for perfection by hand. And they would take all these hammer marks off to give you this smooth surface with a planishing hammer, which is a little flat hammer with a highly polished flat face. And you would hammer over those marks. It wouldn't move the silver, but it would start just to take out the marks. Then it would have obviously be polished afterwards to this smooth surface. So you've got that lovely body. Then you've got the feet. Now these 3 feet, all identical, all cast from the same mould. All cast feet. But again, there's a little bit more detail going on with these, because normally that's just a flat scroll. You can't see it here, but each of these 3 little trefoil toes. It's just slightly faceted. No need for that, just a little bit extra, but faceted as they go down. And these would either be wax cast or sand cast. And actually they're simple enough that I think they're probably a sand casting, a fine sand casting. The handle, that's cast too, very delicate, very moving handle. Look at the movement in it. Always, these little jugs always have these cast scroll handles, but this one's a little bit livelier, a little bit sharp, a little bit crisp. Nice bit of shaping here. All little extra signs of quality, which you would only know if you had handled other examples like this. If this was the first one you'd ever seen, you'd thought, well, they all made them like that, but they didn't. There's just a little bit more care, a little bit more finish taken with this, probably because it's a bit earlier than most, 1744. A lot of the ones you'll see are after 1750 up to 1760, 1765 at a push for this form. And as they get later, they get a little bit thinner. The casting can get a little bit cruder, particularly on the ones that you see by David Moden, who made about half of these that you'll see. The next feature that we've got on this, which is always lovely, you know this about me by now, period engraving. Often these are initialed. This has a cipher on it, not initials. And a cipher is a mirror, two or three entwined initials, all squiggly wiggly, but it's a mirror. If you put it down the middle, it's a mirror image of the initials. And that's a very early feature. You tend to get ciphers on 16th and 17th century silver and very good quality early 18th century silver. I mean, it can turn up any time. It's a form of engraving, but that's when it was popular. And 1744, really, this is the age when ciphers sort of fall away, and you tend to get more just script initials. Certainly 5 or 10 years later, script initials with foliate engraving, or a crest, a family crest. But that's lovely because not only is it a cipher, which is often applied just as a cipher, but it's applied within a lovely foliate cartouche. And again, it's all money. It's all extra expense. You paid shillings more to have a bit of engraving like that on it. What's lovely as well is this has obviously stayed in the same family, because this is the original cipher on it, but then it's passed to a member of the family who has had a crest, maybe a generation, maybe 2 generations later, certainly engraved within the 18th century. Now, if that had gone out of the family, this would be removed or erased, and this crest would go over it. But because it's the same family, this is your father's or your grandfather's cipher, so you just add your crest at the side, which is lovely to see. That's probably why it survived in such lovely condition. It stayed within the same family. And I'll try and huff on that and show you. But round shiny things are quite difficult to photograph and film, so I might have to post detailed images of that later. The other lovely thing about this, and I don't think we've mentioned these before, it has its original scratch weight. What is a scratch weight, Michael? Some of you are asking. I know most of you know. This is for the ones that don't. When you bought a piece of silver from a goldsmith, you would buy it by weight, and then so much per ounce for the manufacturer of it. So you had to know how heavy something was. Now, often the goldsmith would just know and tell you, but sometimes they would actually put the weight on the base of the object, and this is what we've got here. Now, I do hope you can see that after talking about it. Oh dear. There. Just there. Can you see it says 2 with an equal sign? You always get that equal sign, and 18, and that means 2 troy ounces and 18 pennyweights. And there are 20 pennyweights to 1 troy ounce. So it's nearly 3 ounces. And that's placed on the bottom, and that's lovely because also you can weigh these things and you can see if anything substantial's happened to them since they were made by how much silver they've lost. They will always lose a little bit through cleaning, you know, a few, couple, 2 or 3 penny weights over a few hundred years. But if there's an alarming difference between the scratch weight on an object and the actual weight of the object as you're looking at it, then something might have gone wrong. So it's always best to pay attention with these things. And then we've got a lovely set of lovely little hallmarks on the bottom. All the early ones hallmarked at the bottom. When you get a little bit later, you might see the hallmarks here in the mid to late 1760s, 1770s. You might see them here or here, but really on anything that's pre-1750, little jug like this, you want to be seeing the marks at the bottom. And if they're not at the bottom, start to worry. So that's, oh dear, I've gone on for far too long. That's a very pretty little George II cream jug with a hell of a lot of work in it and lots of lovely features. But just look out for these things. I mean, this is quite... you'll see lots of these jugs about. You won't see them as nice as this, but that's what you need to look for. Not everything has to be fantastic quality, supremely rare. You can find a beautiful surviving bit of Georgian silver that's just been beautifully made and survived. And that's worth, you know, that is of its type. I mean, there are cream jugs that people pay £30,000 for that are cast by Paul Delamry and Paul Crespin, and you know, there are gold cream jugs and all sorts of things that are fabulous and museum worthy. But of its type, a little pear-shaped Georgian cream jug from the mid-18th century, that's probably as good as you'll get. So just look out, keep your eyes peeled, and I'll bring you something. I'll try and bring you something extremely rare next week, just to balance up for having shown you a cream jug. But until then, good antiques hunting, and goodbye.